Greetings. My name is Matt Shamblin, RN, CEN, TCRN, and today I want to share something with you that didn't come from a textbook, or a think tank, or a tech startup. It came from necessity. From being overwhelmed with documentation to watching care slip further and further from the bedside and in to the keyboard. This is the story of David, a logic-based artificial intelligence built to restore time, reduce burnout, and bring us all back to what matters most, the patient. Now, before we dive into the how, I want to take you into the why. Because if you understand why David had to exist, you will understand what makes it matter. This presentation was developed for healthcare informatics under the guidance of Dr. Ellen Jones. But David is more than a project. It's a child of exhaustion and determination. It is the answer to a personal and, quite frankly, professional pain point. Something we all feel but rarely challenge. It's my retaliation against inefficiency, my stand against burnout, and, in a way, my tribute to what nursing can be when we're not shackled to the computer. I didn't want to be another voice saying, "It shouldn't be so hard," but I wanted to do something about it. The documentation burden in healthcare is, in a word, crushing. As an emergency nurse, we're expected to work at light speed, respond, assess, stabilize, and save lives. But we also have to chart every detail, every word, every symptom, every teeny tiny little thing. That kind of double expectation fractures attention and steals presence away from the patients. What should take minutes begins taking chunks of an entire shift. Now, it's not because we're lazy, because the systems weren't built for nurses. They were built for billing. They serve compliance, not care. So I created David, a fast, logic-driven documentation assistant designed not by software engineers, detached from the bedside, but someone who lives in it. Its mission: streamline, structure, and simplify. Because nurses shouldn't have to choose between care and compliance. Yeah, I built David. But it's not for me. It's for the ED nurse who has to document in pajama time because they were too busy compressing on a chest. It's for nursing leadership who tries to raise the bar without raising the burden. And really, it's for the patients. Because when we reclaim our time, they get what's needed most: our presence, our judgment, our humanity. Every stakeholder in this equation benefits. Nurses gain faster, smarter workflows. Leaders see improved documentation quality. And patients, I think they're the real benefactors because they receive better and more focused care. Everybody wins when documentation works for us, not against us. But this isn't just about software. This is about restoring dignity to the work that we do. There are multiple forces that compelled me to build David. First, there's national organizations like the CMA, the ONC, AIMA, ANA. Everybody is pushing to reduce the electronic health record burden. The 25x5 initiative claims to cut documentation time by up to 75%. That's not a statistic, that's a signal. A cry for help from a system we all know is strained. Second, structured documentation. And artificial intelligence are emerging as the next frontier. When AI is properly applied, it can reduce charting time by up to 70%. That's just not nice to have. That's the difference between nursing burnout and nurses staying in the field. But the third and most powerful force, I think, was personal. This project was born from pain, from days staring at screens instead of patients, from wondering how long many nurses would be able to stay in this career if something didn't change. David, it's not just a tool. It's a declaration. Enough. Beyond my personal experience, the literature also supports that structured documentation improves note quality. Ebers and his cohorts in 22 did a multi-centered study using the QNote instrument. Now, this found that standardized and structured documentation led up to a 20% increase in note quality across outpatient settings. These notes were, longer, but also clearer, more complete, more concise. This means that structured documentation doesn't just check boxes. It helps nurses record what matters with fewer omissions. This study, it didn't measure documentation time, but it reinforces a point that we all know. When we chart in a logical structure, we move faster, move cleaner, and reduce the chances of error. That's the exact principle David was built with in mind. Now let's talk about constraints. David wasn't some neat academic exercise. It was total war, a campaign. Time was my first enemy. Juggling between full-time work, coursework for the MSN, being a parent, on top of all the other things. David was built in the hours that most people use to sleep. And then there's the reality of Matt. I had to relearn how to think like a machine, how to break problems into logic gates, how to hold multiple threads of conditional logic in my mind while my brain was screaming for utter mercy. There was no funding, no development team, no weekend hackathons, or corporate backing, just me. And quite frankly, sheer force of natural willpower. David, it was built in Python, and it doesn't integrate into any electronic health record yet. It relies on a copy-paste interface, but here's the thing. It works. When built right, even a small personal project can take on the Goliath of EHR and win. So where does David go next? First, we scale. Right now, it's primarily ED focused, but really, that's all in a name. The same underlying logic can be expanded to urgent care, primary care, pediatrics, geriatrics, you name an atrix or an allergy, it's got it. Because it really doesn't matter. Second is integration. Imagine a seamless workflow where David connects directly into the EHR. No more copy pasting, no more toggling between windows, just a single intelligent interface that lives inside the workflow, not beside it. Third, which is where my focus is, mobile. My next mission is to refactor the entire code base in Kivy so it can be used on tablets and smartphones. So that's where the nurse goes, David can follow. That's how we evolve. That is how we get our time back. This isn't just a tech project. It's a crucible. And quite frankly, it refined me like all crucibles do. It deepened my understanding of resilience, pushing through neurofatigue, rewriting broken lines of logic, and starting from scratch more times than I care to count. It also deepened my understanding of discipline, how to focus when I was exhausted, how to move when I was not certain, and how to prioritize better under pressure. I learned perfection was not the goal. I had many goals for David, but adaptability is. David broke more times than I can count, but each one taught me how to code faster, smarter, and leaner. These lessons weren't just theoretical, they were earned in the arena where life, work, and ambition collided. That's what Marcus Aurelius taught. That's how Miyamoto Musashi lived. And it is what David eventually became, a product of unrelenting will. David proves something important. Logic-based artificial intelligence isn't just conceptual, it's real. It works. It reduces charting time. It improves note consistency. And it gives back something far more valuable. It gives back nursing presence. There's room to grow, sure. It could be a cleaner interface. It could be smarter. It could be more adaptable. But the core is there. The foundation, solid. So my long-term vision for David, once it's complete, formal evaluations, efficiency metrics, maybe even longitudinal studies of its use. I want David to be tested in the same way we test protocols, under fire, under duress. And I think I would like it to be a standard, a tool that lives inside of every nurse's toolkit, just like a stethoscope. In many ways, David reflects who I am, distilled into lines of code. So here is what David looks like in action, because these are still shots. It's a sleek, simple interface, logic gates driving form behavior, clinical inputs triggering conditional recommendations, lung field mapping, I love this picture, automated documentation preview. It's got smart organization. And this isn't theory. It's working software, already beta tested in the real world. I built it one decision tree at a time. The goal of David is to free the nurse. Let the nurse treat the patient more than the nurse treats the screen. Now, before I close, I want to take a moment, not for the system, not for the software, but for the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. I know I mention it often, and I do so for only one reason. It's because it was the hardest battle that I've ever faced. Strokes just don't change and challenge the body. It changes and challenges the mind, the most powerful weapon any of us possess. Choosing this project was choosing to wake up part of myself that, quite frankly, I wasn't sure still existed. Something that hadn't been touched long before the walls came down. You know, I've never been one to choose the easy path. For me, I always take the hard one. Building David from nothing wasn't just about documentation. It was about proving to myself that I could still push beyond what I believed was possible. Because the truth is, I didn't know if I still could, but I pressed forward anyway. I may or may not have said this before, but it bears repeating. Imagination is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It's what drives me to be better than I think I can be. It's what I hope to pass on, to think beyond the edges of what we're given, and to realize that this box may have never been deserved to be there in the first place. I'll close with a quote that's never very far from me. The journey of 1,000 miles proceeds step by step. Miyamoto Musashi. David was built in the same way I rebuilt myself, one step at a time, through long nights, through uncertainty, through moments even when for just an instant I thought it couldn't be done. But it was, because I kept walking. That is the most valuable lesson. David is not just a tool. It's a symbol of what happens when we stop waiting for change and start creating it, of what it means to fight, for not just change, but for a better way forward. Thank you.